Hi, I'm Shelby and I love Shakespeare. Today I'm going to be breaking down Juliet's monologue from Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Her very famous speech that begins, "Oh Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" in the balcony scene in Act 2, Scene 2. In this tutorial, I'm going to go line by line and tell you what Juliet's saying, including the vocabulary, why she's saying it, and where the speech fits into the context of the play as a whole. If you want to see a performance of this monologue first, check out mine. Otherwise, let's dive into Juliet's very famous speech, "Oh Romeo, Romeo." I like to do my text work in 3 sections. I call them Up to This Point, Vocab and Paraphrase, and the 3 chunks. So let's get started. Up to this point, Juliet has met Romeo at a party. And that's pretty much it. This is Act 2, Scene 2, and every Shakespeare play has 5 acts. We met Juliet in her room. Also there was the nurse, the woman who raised her, and her mom came in, who she's a little estranged with, but her mom came in very awkwardly and said, your father's throwing a party and there might be someone there who's interested in marrying you. And Juliet's like, okay, cool. So then she goes to this party, and in Act 1, Scene 5, she meets Romeo for the very first time. Romeo has been dragged to the party by his buddies who are like, God, you're so in love with this Rosaline character. Just come to the party, you'll forget all about her. And he's like, no, nothing will ever make me forget her. And then he sees Juliet and everything's forgotten. They famously meet and share a sonnet together. And then the next time they see each other is the very famous scene known as the balcony scene, because Juliet comes out on her balcony and Romeo says, "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks." Interestingly enough, in the text, there's actually no mention of a balcony. I know. So we've just always seen it done with a balcony, but all that we know is that she comes through a window. But per kind of the original staging of what the theaters looked like in Shakespeare's time and to this day, there is a balcony space. And so we assume that that's where we got it from, is that she comes through the window light up in the balcony. So Romeo gets away from his buddies after he meets this girl at the party. They're trying to find him and be like, dude, where are you? And he's like, oh, I just don't want to be around them. I want to think about this girl and find this girl. And so he stays at Juliet's dad's house, who just had a party, and like is wandering the grounds in order to maybe get a glimpse of her sometime. That's when he says the very famous line, "But soft with light through yonder window breaks," because he's literally like in her yard and sees a light coming through a window. So he says, oh my gosh, it's her. But he hides away a little bit because she's sighing and maybe will start speaking, and he's a little nervous to talk to her because she's really beautiful and he already fell in love with her, all of that. So that's what happens before this speech. Juliet is walking out on her balcony and she speaks to no one. She's speaking to the air. She's speaking, she's saying her thoughts out loud. And so even though she's saying, "Oh, Romeo, Romeo," she's not talking to him. She's talking to the ether as you would when you're completely in love. She's reminiscing about this boy that she just met. And that's gotten us up to this point. So now let's go line by line and make sure we know all of the vocab, of which in this speech there isn't too much that's kind of confusing. It's pretty straightforward, but I'll make sure you know every part of it. And at the end, I'll give a little paraphrase and put it in my own words, just to make it make a little bit more contemporary sense if you still need that. So let's start with the first line. "Oh Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" So many things to note here, just even in this first very famous line. So O isn't OH like we would spell it today, it's just the letter O. We call that in acting the Shakespeare O, meaning that it kind of comes from the bowels, from the depths. Anytime you see that in a Shakespeare text, it gives a clue to the actor to let out a sigh, let out a scream, something very extreme and visceral and deep. So, "Oh, Romeo" could be just ecstasy, or it could be, "Oh, for a muse of fire," that's trying to call in someone's imagination. So it's kind of this otherworldly sound that you get permission to do when you see that O. So, "Oh, Romeo," she's just met a guy that she likes. She has a new crush, so I assume it's a sigh. It's an delicious, but also that love-sick painfulness. Oh, can tell so much about Juliet's state. Also, thinking about why did she have to come out to the balcony, or why did she want to, right? Catch some fresh air, just breathe it in. So even just in that first O, so much information. Then she says, Romeo, Romeo. Why does she say his name twice? By the end of this first line, she'll actually say it 3 times. When there's a repetition in Shakespeare, it's not meant to be said the exact same way. So we get to brainstorm and kind of identify why it would be repeated. So why would a girl newly in love want to repeat the name of her love? Because it's, oh, her love. Oh, just saying it. It's almost the equivalent of writing your name in with little hearts and with someone else's last name, right? I'm just trying it on for the first time. Oh my gosh, that was him. You know, that O can also be a catching of breath. She's in her room and the party has ceased. So I don't know if it's a breathlessness, but that's another choice that can happen too. So Romeo, maybe it's the first time she's actually said it out loud. When she met this guy, they didn't have time to exchange names. She had to run over to the nurse and say, hey nurse, who's that guy that's leaving? Now Juliet's family, the Capulets, and Romeo's family, the Montagues, are completely dead rivals. Family feud for longer than anyone can remember. And the only way that Romeo and his friends could sneak in is that it was a masked party. So the Capulets didn't know that they were Montagues. So when she asked the nurse, hey, who's that guy? She says, that's the son of your sworn enemy named Romeo. And that's the first time she hears it. So perhaps on this balcony and in this speech, it's the first time she said it out loud. What a lovely discovery a young actor could have with that. Oh, Romeo. And then maybe even be a little surprised that she gets to say it. So no wonder she repeats it. Oh, and just lavishes in it. Then the third time she says it, I think has a little bit different of a tone. Wherefore art thou Romeo? Now, wherefore doesn't actually mean where. The word where is in it, but wherefore as a term means why. So, oh Romeo, Romeo, why art thou Romeo? Why are you Romeo? Of all of the people that I could meet tonight, and you assume it's this swirling large party, why did it have to be you? Why did it have to be the person, the one person in this whole land that I can't have a relationship with, but can't even speak to or not supposed to? So in one line, it sets up her ecstasy and her conflict. Oh, Romeo, Romeo. It can get larger because even though there's a Shakespeare O at the beginning, Romeo has 2 O's in it. So nom nom nom, languish. And then a switch of wherefore art thou Romeo? So suddenly she loves the name, and then she, I don't know if she hates the name, but she hates that the name itself and who he is will keep her from this new love that she has. One line, the setup and the conflict. Beautiful. No wonder it's famous. And then in the second line, she finds the solution. Deny thy father and refuse thy name. So if the name is the issue, why art thou Romeo? Wherefore art thou Romeo? Then just don't be Romeo anymore. Just change your name, change your identity. Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Such strong verbs. Remember that Juliet in this play is 13 years old. There's a whole speech by her nurse that her mom thinks she's 14, and the nurse is like, no, at Lambeth Tide at night she'll be 14, meaning she's not quite 14 yet. So Juliet is 13 years old, and for her to have an immediate crush on someone, let alone share a sonnet with them, and then indulge in her love, and then curse it in a way, and then immediately say, let's just change who we are. Let's leave, let's run away. Deny thy father, refuse thy name. Can't hang around the house still. So that's a very bold thing for her to do, especially when we've really only seen her in that scene before with the nurse and her mom, where mom says, think about marriage, and she's like, I'll look to like if looking liking move, you know. Sure, okay, I'll check it out. She's obedient. She's very intelligent, which a lot of people don't give her credit for. But it's not like we've seen her before and we're like, geez, she's really rebellious and she's looking for a way to run away or change who she is. she's got a great life and she's kind of just at the beginning of it. And then this interaction of meeting this boy just blows her whole world up. Again, in a beautiful way, and then in a conflicting way, and then in a defiant way. Nom nom nom. And it's thy father and refuse thy name. Why are you Romeo? Well then don't be Romeo. And then the next line, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. So you can change your name because our families hate each other's names, or if you're not willing to, I'll change my name. Or if thou wilt not, if you won't do it, be but sworn my love. Swear to me that you love me, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. Capulet is her last name. So Romeo Montague, Juliet Capulet. So she's not some damsel who goes, oh, I hope we can resolve this, dear. She says, oh my gosh, I have a really practical idea. Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Or if thou wilt not be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. We figured it out. In my performance of this on my channel, I use that moment for her to kind of try on rebellion, and she gets a little giddy about it. But it can also be a moment of the first time she's ever even thought of defiance, and maybe that surprises her a little bit. But it's interesting to note that she says, I'll change my name too, not just to date you, but if you swear you love me, which at that time means marriage. And what's so fun after that is that Romeo speaks. When you do a monologue, especially in an audition setting or something, you don't have another person there saying it. But the actor needs to know that when she says, you know, you refuse your dad, or if you won't do it, then I'll do it. Romeo says, shall I hear more or shall I speak at this? So he's kind of in, oh my God, that's amazing. Should I talk? Or like, I don't know. He's probably talking to the audience or he's talking to himself, but he's trying to figure out, like, she's saying amazing things, which would be a perfect entrance time for him. But also he kind of is listening in on her private thoughts and wants to hear more because it's going really well. So he has this little aside, meaning that Juliet can't hear. And that's when he says, shall I hear more? Shall I speak at this? But she keeps going. 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. So 'tis meaning it is. 'Tis but thy name, meaning it's only your name that's the enemy. It's not you, it's not who you are. It's truly your name. Because my family name hates your family name way before we were even born. 'Tis but thy name that is mine enemy. That's it. It's just that. Thou art thyself, though, not a Montague. Thou, you are yourself, thyself, not a Montague. Montague may be who Romeo's name is, but your given name, your family name, your surname isn't who you are. Just like your socioeconomic status, your things that you were born into isn't who you are. It's just your circumstance. It's your outward situation rather than who you really are on the inside. And then she repeats the word Montague in the next line. What's Montague? And just that little chunk we'll stay with for now instead of looking at the whole verse line. And when I say verse line, I mean the whole line before it indents down. And for those of you who don't know, each verse line is written in something called Iambic Pentameter. If you'd like a tutorial on that, check it out over here. But it basically means that each line of verse or poetry has 10 syllables with an alternating pattern of unstressed and stressed syllables. 'Tis but thy name that is mine enemy. Yeah? Ba 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 ba. So that's why it indents down. So we go back to the text. What's Montague? She's saying the word Montague again. And you know how when you say a word over and over again, it loses meaning? I think she's playing with that idea. You know, she says Romeo 3 times already, but it all had different connotations. And when she says, what's Montague? It already has that like, it's nothing. So when she says it again, I think it's an intensifying moment of disgust, but not in the way that her family feud hates the other name. It's just an annoyance of why does that name, that word, mean anything? It's nothing. Nothing compared to our love for each other. So what's Montague? She asks the question, and then she tries to answer it. It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. So again, she's driving home this idea by naming different body parts. It's not who you are. This isn't a Montague, right? There's nothing on you that is Montague except someone put the name on you. It's like if you were adopted per se, right? You had one name at one time and then you've been given another name. It's something that is or can be transferable, but your arm can't really be transferred. This is your arm. But Montague, it is nor hand, nor foot, meaning not your hand, not your foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. There's an option here to think about what part she might be referring to. Wink, wink. But again, she's 13, and who knows if she was even thinking about like the calf or something like that. But usually when people hear the phrase other part of a man, they're talking about a more private area that potentially at 13 would make her giggle. But the thing about Juliet is that even though she's 13 and Romeo, we don't quite know his exact age, but around 16, definitely older than Juliet, but not crazy, they have sexual feelings. The whole idea of Romeo and Juliet is that it is a tidal wave of a sexual awakening and the first huge feelings of romance that either of them have felt. Deep, true love rather than Rosaline that Romeo had or maybe had been in lust with. And they don't quite know how to deal with them. So that's why things go a little fast, or they have to keep it secret because of the feuding families. So there's all these reasons that point to them not really knowing how to deal with this correctly. But the balcony scene is such a gorgeous moment because it's the only time that it's just the two of them. After this, a million different parties have to get involved in order for them to get married, keep up this secret, and eventually devise a way that they could be together by faking their deaths, which end up resulting in their actual deaths, which is the tragedy of the piece. However, it's kind of a comedy until the end of Act 3 when Mercutio dies, and that's when the body count begins. So the balcony scene is much funnier than people give it credit for. And it starts with this outpouring of love from Romeo's famous speeches and then Juliet's. All that to say, if there's a joke about manhood, go for it. Because Shakespeare loved those. Loved dirty jokes. Especially in this play. Mercutio is all dirty jokes. So, let Juliet have one too. Okay, next line. Oh, be some other name. Another Shakespeare O. Who cares about names? Just be another name. Any other name. Oh, be some other name. Come on. Then, very famous line. What's in a name? So she's already said, what's Montague? But now she goes a little bit more philosophical and says, what's in a name? She's on her balcony after all and waxing poetical, thinking she's alone. And I don't know if she's going into abject philosophy necessarily, but maybe it's the first time she's really considering her parents' feud and the implications therein. What's in a name? Let me think about this. Queuing up even more, I keep saying famous, but this is the famous line. That which we call a rose, by any other name would smell as sweet. So she's thinking, what's a name? So let me take it out of the context of this dude I just met who I'm super into. Let's just think about it in general terms. And she's on her balcony, presumably looking over a garden wall, and so maybe she sees a rose. So she's looking around. Let me think about this in a larger context. Maybe sees a rose. A rose, by any other name, if you called it a carpet or whatever, it would smell as sweet. It would have the exact same scent, whether it was called a carpet or a light bulb or anything. It's still a rose by any other name. Now, in my performance, I say a rose by any other word would smell as sweet. In the folio, it says word. In the quartos, it says name. It depends on the edition you get, of which the editor has kind of chosen to use word or name. But it's up to the production, it's up to the actor. But the very famous quoted line is, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So if that's true, then we also look at how many times the word name is repeated. What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet, blah, blah, blah. So if you use name again, it just has to be a little bit different because it's repeated. I use word, I think, because name has been used so much, and it takes it into the context that has a little bit of that separation, which I like. A rose by any other word, you know, let's take it even out of the context of names. Any words you can call it would still work. So for me, it helps drive it home a bit more of how silly it is, because it's just a word. Name has a little more importance, but again, it's up to the actor. And there's textual support for both choices. Next line. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. A rose, by any other word or name, would smell as sweet. So Romeo would. And so would Romeo. If he wasn't called Romeo, if he wasn't named Romeo, he still would smell as sweet. He would still talk like he talks. I love that idea too of him smelling sweet, right? That she's still kind of remembering how he smelled when he was close to her and spouting sonnets. Come on, so cute. Retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. So the title of his name, the dear perfection which he owes without it, he is perfection, whatever name or word he's identified by. He would retain it. He would keep it. Every bit of him that she loves and is his essence would remain and be retained, kept, whatever they called him. So, in her mind, she's won her argument. Romeo, doff thy name. Romeo, I mentioned earlier, has those big O's. In general, if you're playing a lover, there's more vowels in it. More of a loving line, or you want to really invest in how kind of emotionally large something is, you lean into the vowels. And in the opposite way, if you have more of a villainous kind of biting, either character or moment, then you can lean into the consonants. So could you imagine if I said, oh Romeo, doff thy name? Right, sounds like Lady Macbeth all of a sudden. Vowels are lovers, consonants are villains in a very broad context. Not always a rule, but something that's kind of a fun clue. It's a sigh all the time, and you get to use that. Last time she says his name, and I think revels in it again. Doff thy name. Doff means cast off, to relinquish, to get rid of it. Doff thy name. Again, she's not speaking to Romeo because she doesn't know he's hovering about in the darkness, but she's kind of speaking to him in a general way. If he was here, this is what I would tell him to do. And again, I think it's very brave of her to do at her age and in her social status. I'll give up everything, including my name and who I am, because I love you. Romeo, doff thy name, and for thy name, which is no part of thee, take all myself. The payment for getting rid of your name is me. And for thy name, which is no part of thee, meaning it's not actually who you are, it's just a name, take all myself. And all of herself, right? We were talking about body parts earlier. She's saying, take my whole body as well. A little bit later in the play, she has a whole speech about my body is ready. With the first line, gallop apace, you fiery-footed steeds. But in this moment, it's just the awakening. It's maybe the first time she's tried on what taking all myself would even mean. So as physical as possible. Oh my gosh, imagining him taking all myself. And the best part about this whole thing is that right after this speech, Romeo finally decides to pop up. I guess he's heard enough to get him the confidence to say something and come out of lurking in the shadows. So she says, Romeo doth thy name, and for thy name which is no part of thee, take all myself. And then there's a shared line, meaning he picks right up to finish off the verse line. It's a cue to the actor that it's right after the other person stops talking, you start talking. I take thee at thy word. So he pops out of the darkness, and she has this lovely moment of, I'm confident, this is what I would say if he was here, and then he's here. Oh my God! And usually, at least when I played it, I was like, blah, and ducked under the balcony. So I played Juliet in my senior year in high school when I was a baby, and I actually had a recent interview with the director of that show, who's still my dear friend and Shakespeare guru mentor. So if you'd like to see that interview, I will put it up here in the cards and also in the description below. So I mentioned Romeo's line right after that because I think it's really important for the person doing this speech to, when she says, take all myself, to really physicalize that. She's in a private place, so she's able to be vulnerable. And the more vulnerable and open and everything's going so well, the more comic opportunity there is for when he's like, okay, cool. And she's like, JK. So huge. And then the big opposite of, oh my God. Because her next line after he's like, yeah, I'll take thee at thy word. Call me but love and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth, I never will be Romeo. So he's like, yeah, love the name doffing off plan. Awesome. But her next line isn't like, oh good, let's do the plan. She goes, what man art thou that thus bescreened in night so stumblest on my counsel? Has no idea it's Romeo. It's just like a dude lurking in her garden where she thought was private. Within that context, it's just helpful to give yourself permission to go for it so that you can freak out a little bit and then melt back into Romeo once you know that it's him. Nice! So let's do a little bit of a paraphrase just to make sure we really understand that. So here's what I would say. Oh, Romeo. Why is your name Romeo? Leave your house and change your name. Just change your identity. Or if you won't, just promise you love me and I'll change mine. It's just that name that's the problem. That's not you. I mean, what is your name even? What is Montague? It's not any part of your body. It's not anything that who you really are. It's not those parts of your body either. So just change your name. I mean, when we think about it, like what is a name even? I guess it's an identifier for us, but if this beautiful flower was not called a beautiful flower, it would still smell like it smells. It would still be that flower, whatever we decided to call it. I mean, humans named everything anyway, so if they had named it something different, it still would have that scent. Just like you would if you changed your name. You would have your scent that I'm really liking. And you would be the exact same person. So just get rid of your name. Because if you get rid of your name, then, you know, as a reward, I'll give you me. I'll give you me. And then the paraphrase of him being like, okay, cool, let's do that. And her going, oh my God. That's the paraphrase for that. So we've done up to this point, vocab and paraphrase. And now, just to make sure we really understand it, I like to do 3 chunks. If we think about a monologue, especially in an audition context, as something that is a mini play, let's think of it as an act 1, act 2, act 3, a 3-act structure, beginning, middle, end. This ensures that your performance has an arc or has some difference within it rather than I'm playing angry the whole time or I'm playing love the whole time. So let's think about these 3 chunks and where they are. I think the first chunk is pretty clear because it's interrupted by Romeo, by a line. So, oh Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be Capulet. So again, within that little chunk though, there is ecstasy, there's conflict, and a potential solution. But all of that I think is wrapped up in just the burgeoning of the issue, but still kind of wrapped in, I've just met this guy and oh my gosh, he's not right for me at all, says my parents, but I don't care. The second chunk would be her reasoning about all of this of, yeah, like what's Montague? What's in a name in general? Why do we care about that? So then it gets a little bit more didactic, it gets a little bit more philosophical, but not inactive. She's really trying to figure this out, maybe even preparing an argument for if anyone rails against her for like, why are you dating that boy? And you're like, I have a beautiful argument prepared, Mom. So then the third chunk would be, yeah, that makes sense to me, so screw it. Let's do it. Let's just go be in love and run away, and this will be awesome. So now we're almost at the end. We have 3 chunks, and now we're just gonna pick one word for each of those chunks. It can be your own words. I'll just tell you what mine are, but it really allows us to crystallize that journey, beginning, middle, end. The beginning, it's almost a bubbling of, oh my gosh, I have all these feelings, oh no, it's actually a bad feeling. It's a bad taste in my mouth above all. I can't think about how sweet this taste is because there's this bitter issue. So it's discovering what the problem is. So my first chunk word would be discover. The second chunk is all about reasoning. It's about really exploring what this problem is. Now that you've discovered the problem, let's really kind of dissect the problem. And because it's a little more visceral and active for me, I'm gonna say my word is needle. I'm going to needle this problem. So first I'm discovering it, and then I'm really trying to poke holes in this argument. And so once I've poked enough holes in it, then I have the third chunk, which is kind of a victory. Every speech, every line, or at least beat in a way, should be a victory or a defeat. Because if you as an actor, you as a character are always going for something, for your objective, like we say in acting, you're either winning or you're losing. And if you're losing, then you switch tactics in order to find a different way to win. And at certain points, you lose. But it's always thinking about that victory and defeat. So she has a big victory at the end, at least in her mind, of I've figured out the problem, I've solved the problem, or proved that it's not really a problem, and then I've won. I think it needs to be a large word, a victorious word, maybe just all. So discover, needle. Oh, that's fun, right? So especially when you have multiple monologues in your repertoire, if you're about to go to an audition and they say, what else do you have? And you're like, here are my 10 pieces. In the ideal world. If they say, great, I want Juliet's super famous speech, see what you do with it, then you can remember these 3 words rather than remembering your whole process. It's just these 3 words, whatever they are for you. But you want words that connect with you, that make sense to you, and that also ignite the speech for you and the joy you have about it. So now you know everything about this super famous speech of Juliet's. Thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you learned things. If you did, please do the little like below so that other people can find this and it can help them as well. If you would like to see more Shakespeare shenanigans and weekly joy on Willy Wednesdays, please subscribe to my channel below. And I'll see you super soon. Anon!